U.S. sanctions against Russia nearing limits as Ukraine escalates military strikes. Putin's activity is simulated. Where has he disappeared while Russian propaganda ramps up its nuclear rhetoric? 226 clashes in a day. Russians aims to take Pokrovsk, but can't protect their citizens from Flamingo missiles launched this night. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that Washington has effectively reached its limit in imposing new sanctions against Russia. He said this while speaking to journalists after a meeting of the G7 foreign ministers in Canada.
Well, there's not a lot left to sanction from our part. I mean, we hit their major oil companies, which is what everybody's been asking for. Obviously, those have to be implemented, and it'll take some time to begin to feel it. But, I mean, I don't know what more there is to do. I mean, we're running out of things to sanction
Shadow
in that
fleet.
regard. Well, Shadow Fleet is an enforcement mechanism, and obviously sanctions have to be enforced. So, we don't put sanctions and then not enforce them. We're interested in enforcing them as well. So, but that's more of an enforcement matter. And Shadow Fleet has come up because I do think there are things that the Europeans can do on Shadow Fleet, since a lot of these are happening in areas much closer to them.
There's always another way out. As Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Kirill Budanov, chief of the main intelligence directorate, and Robert Brovdy, commander of the unmanned systems forces, have said, the most effective sanctions against Russia are military ones. This year, and especially over the past 3 months, Ukraine has been systematically targeting Russian oil refineries and other facilities in the oil sector. According to the Security Service of Ukraine, drone strikes have knocked out about 37% of Russia's oil refining capacity. These attacks on Russian refineries have reduced the processing and export of petroleum products, leading to an increase in crude oil exports. The aggressor's army is deprived of a critical resource, fuel, without which active combat operations are impossible. After the U.S. refused to approve the sale of Lukoil's foreign assets, the company now risks losing its international holdings and facing pressure from Rosneft. These overseas divisions are valued at around 14 billion euros, and the loss of its refineries would deprive Lukoil of about a quarter of its oil processing capacity, according to the Financial Times. In several countries, local authorities may already be preparing to seize refineries and gas stations in order to protect national energy security. Lukoil is also facing difficulties in Iraq and Moldova, where its income and control over assets have come under strain. Meanwhile, in the Russian market, the company is losing ground due to the dominance of Rosneft and Gazprom Neft. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, many former republics gained independence and have no desire to return under Russia's influence, instead choosing to cooperate with the West or China, according to The Hill. Eastern European countries have joined the EU and NATO, while Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia are trying to balance between Moscow and their own independence. Belarus is formally an ally of Russia, but avoids direct participation in the war against Ukraine. Ukraine, meanwhile, is considered completely lost to Moscow. Its people are firmly defending their sovereignty and identity. Experts believe that Putin's imperial ambitions are doomed due to the growing strength of neighboring countries and the weakening of Russia's army and economy. Moreover, Russia's own political culture is deeply rooted in the belief in the legitimacy of endless expansion and in its supposed civilizational mission. For this reason, The Hill notes, Putin will undoubtedly continue trying to extend Russian influence wherever possible. Journalists from the opposition Russian outlet The Project have revealed that the practice of pre-recorded meetings with dictator Putin, known as canned videos, has been in use since 2012. Initially, they were used sparingly for specific events, but between 2015 and 2018, they became routine, with officials wearing the same outfits and a stable arrangement of objects in the office. By 2019 to 2021, these canned videos were presented as live meetings, and since 2022, the method has been actively used in the context of the war against Ukraine. By 2025, even the smallest details are being carefully adjusted, such as the positioning of pens, books, and decor, to make the recordings appear as realistic as possible. Journalists note that sometimes small differences in these details give away that the meetings were pre-recorded. Russian dictator Putin has instructed relevant agencies to prepare proposals for the possible resumption of nuclear tests after more than a 30-year hiatus. He made this statement during a public portion of the Russian Security Council meeting on November 5th, which was open to propagandist media. The Kremlin clarified that no final decision has been made on conducting the tests. and the issue requires a so-called balanced approach. According to some media reports, the Novaya Zemlya testing range may be ready for potential tests. The European Union has urged Moscow to refrain from actions that could escalate the arms race and increase the risk of nuclear escalation. Experts warn that even discussing such tests raises global security tensions. At the same time, Russian propaganda is ramping up its nuclear rhetoric. On federal TV channels, Dmitry Kiselev and Vladimir Solovyov have started discussing the so-called power of Russian weaponry and the potential for nuclear war with the U.S. On air, there have been statements claiming that the Poseidon underwater drone is capable of destroying an American aircraft carrier and that a testing range on Novaya Zemlya is fully prepared for trials. However, the Ministry of Defense is not releasing any footage confirming the readiness of the infrastructure or the actual capabilities of the new systems. All information comes only from Putin.
In general, I have to say that over the past 7 years, taking into account the pandemic years, what has been done to modernize our nuclear triad is truly exceptional and impressive. There have been operational tactical Kinzhal missiles, Iskander, Zircon, the medium-range Oreshnik, and unique strategic assets like Poseidon and Burevestnik. More than 10 new types of weapons, nuclear delivery systems have been adopted into service. But
we've only used the Oreshnik once, and that was on Dnipropetrovsk. Yes,
just once.
exactly. That's why the West doesn't really notice it. So until we hit somewhere else so they can see it.
Absolutely right. They're asking for it, they're provoking it, and think that you shouldn't refuse those who ask. Our next one, so to speak, isn't far off. Especially since, as the president said, Oreshnik has already entered serial production. The production of this system. So I think that if the Ukrainians keep resisting and especially keep carrying out terrorist acts on our territory, I think it won't just be a test launch, but the series of combat launches of Oreshnik will be carried out.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian weapons are proving their effectiveness in action. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed strikes on several Russian military targets on the night of November 13th in the occupied territories of Zaporizhzhia and Crimea, including the use of domestic systems Flamingo, Bars, and Luty. Video footage shows sorties of 5 Flamingo missiles developed by Firepoint. They have hit targets deep inside Russian territory. The extent of the damage is still being assessed. On the Zaporizhzhia front, strikes hit an oil depot near occupied Berdyansk and Russian army command posts. In Crimea, hits were recorded on the Morskoy oil terminal, helicopter parking areas, UAV storage, and prep sites at Kirovsky airfield, and a radar station near Yevpatoria. Over the past 24 hours, 226 combat clashes were recorded along the entire front line. Russian forces made limited advances in some areas, but no breakthroughs occurred. On the Zaporizhzhia front, Ukrainian units repositioned to more advantageous lines, while the enemy is eyeing Huliaipol, a key railway hub central to Russian logistics. The Pokrovsk direction remains the main focus of Russian attacks, with the highest number of daily assaults, though the city remains under Ukrainian control and no encirclement has occurred. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy noted that Russia aims to take Pokrovsk to pressure the U.S. President Trump into supporting a withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Donetsk and Luhansk, but Zelenskyy affirmed that this will not happen. After the G7 foreign ministers meeting, journalists asked Marco Rubio whether he believes Russia genuinely seeks peace. U.S. Secretary of State stated that Russia wants control over all of Donetsk, which Ukraine will not accept. He added that Russia continues long-range strikes to damage Ukrainian power grids, and so Washington is negotiating with Ukraine to provide defensive weapons and energy recovery equipment.
Well, we can only go by what we see. I mean, I think they've stated clearly what they want is they want the rest of Donetsk, and obviously the Ukrainians aren't going to agree to that. So what we see now is they continue long-range strikes into Ukraine, obviously to degrade their electrical grid and try to demoralize the country or what have you. And they've made some gains in Donetsk, and they're losing 7,000 soldiers a week, 7,000 dead soldiers a week from Russia's side. So as of now, I mean, that's the assessment we have to make. They've made a demand that Ukraine can't agree to, and so we're sort of where we are at this point. So, you know, that's why we've been in discussions with them about defensive weapons to be able to protect their grid.
Thank you for watching News Digest. Stay tuned for updates and stay informed. See you in the next episode.